In this video, I talked about a problem with jazz pedagogy, including my own, in that it puts too much emphasis on what we need to know rather than on what we need to hear. Now, based on the comments, I think we've touched on a common nerve. In that video, I referred to teaching and learning as a process of self-guided discovery. Now, I think it may have been Socrates who said, "I cannot teach anybody anything, I can only make them think." So, to the degree that jazz improvisation can be taught, or students guided towards self-discovery, we can't ignore the theoretical aspects of the music entirely. To become a skilled improviser, most people won't be able to rely only on their ears, but we can at least try to present the pedagogy in a way that puts the horse before the cart, or in this case, the sound before the theory. Right now, I want you to listen to a few seconds of a backing track, which is based on a single chord. Now, depending on where you are in your musical evolution, you might be able to ascertain certain things about what you're hearing, like what kind of chord it is or even which chord it is. But whether you can or you can't do that, I don't want you to focus on any of it. I just want you to let the sound sink in. Now we're going to do something that'll help you dig a little deeper into what you're hearing, attune your ears to the inner workings of the music. I do this at clinics because it gets the audience involved in what they're hearing and it gives them some degree of choice. We could compare it to an appointment with the eye doctor where you may have looked through a machine that looks like this one. Now imagine if the doctor simply asked whether what you were seeing is the correct prescription. Well, if it's worse than what your naked eye sees, then you can say no. But if it's better, you can't really say for sure if that's as good as it can get. Instead, you're given a series of binary choices. Each time you say which is better, one or two, and by process of elimination, which may get you to a point that you can't actually tell which of two options is better, the doctor can determine the best prescription for your eyes. We're going to do something similar with your ears, sounding out each note of a scale by giving you a choice of two options. Now to begin, we need to pick a starting note, and to do that, we listen for any note in the backing track that seems to stand out. If you hear one, sing it, or keep the pitch in your mind and see if the note that I choose matches the one that you're hearing. If you heard or you picked a different note, well, that's fine. Any note can work as the starting note, but we'll go with the one that I heard, and I'm betting that the majority of you chose the same one, because it really seemed like it was a prominent note in the piano voicing at the start of the track. Next, I'm going to play the starting note, followed by a note that's a half step above, and then a note that's a whole step above. You listen and see which one you prefer. So my preference is clearly for the whole step. Now you're not wrong if you chose the half step, but it does indicate that you're a fan of dissonance. Rather than labeling notes as right or wrong, think of them as consonant or dissonant and in varying degrees. Now dissonance is not inherently a bad thing because it sets up tension and resolution, and that makes the music interesting just like it does in a storyline. Now as we add notes building up the scale, your ears gain perspective, and it becomes easier to hear the way each note fits into the harmonic structure. So now we'll move on to the third note. I'll play the first two, and then I'll try both options on the third, up a half step and then up a whole step. On the third note, well, it's pretty obvious to my ears that the half step is the better of the two options. So the first two intervals as we build up this scale are a whole step followed by a half step. Now, all scales can be defined as a specific pattern of intervals, which are usually whole steps or half steps. So now we'll move on to the fourth note. This time, the whole step sounded better. So the pattern of intervals to reach the fourth note is now whole step, half step, whole step. Now, most of the time, the choice is pretty obvious, but sometimes you'll get one where you're a little on the fence or opinion might be split. Also, once you've sounded out the scale and you use the notes to improvise, which is the goal, you may change your mind about one of them. Now that's all good. You're sharpening your ears. So let's go for the fifth note. On this one, the whole step seems more consonant, but the half step has a kind of a bluesy sound to it, and it is something that an improviser might choose to play in this harmonic context. I'm going to stick with a more consonant choice, so the pattern of intervals to reach the fifth note is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. And on we go to the sixth. Here again, the whole step sounds more consonant, although I can imagine that some people could choose the half step. Now there's a reason for that, but it does require some theory to explain it, so I'm not going to go there right now. The pattern of intervals is now whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step. Now we move on to the seventh and final note in the scale. So on the seventh note, it seems pretty clear to me that the half step is the better choice. Now if I add the starting note at the top to complete the scale, the pattern of intervals is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step. Now I'm going to use these 7 notes to improvise a little, first without the track and then with the track. Now these are not the only notes I can play. There's a way to make any note work on any chord, and that goes back to consonance and dissonance. But based on what I sounded out, they are the notes that most clearly align with the harmonic structure of the track. Okay, before I move on to the next demonstration, let me point out that there was no cover charge to watch this video, although if you don't have YouTube Premium, you do have to suffer through the ads. All that I ask is that you click the like button right now, and afterwards, if you want to learn more about my books and online lessons, visit chasesanborn.com. Links in the description. Now, to give your ears another take on it, I'm going to switch to a different track. It's still based on a single chord, but it's in a different key and with a different kind of groove. I'll go through the same process of trying both half steps and whole steps, but this time I'm not going to stop to talk. I will indicate on screen which I prefer, and again, you see if that jibes with what you hear. Now, I haven't talked about what chords are being played or what kind of scales I sounded out, and that's by design. I want you to focus on not what it is, but what it sounds like. Now, some of you may be able to tell by listening what scale or chord it is, and that's great, but you still benefit from honing in on each note individually before you start trying to string them together to create melodies. A note is just a note, but it takes on a different color depending on the harmonic context. So before we move on, I want you to try this on your own. If you have someone who can play you a chord on the piano or the guitar without telling you what it is, go through the process of sounding out the scale and then try to improvise with it. Now, another option is to go on YouTube and type in single chord backing track. You'll get a bunch of them. The titles will give away which chord it is, and the exercise is more effective if you don't know that. But it'll still work as long as you focus on what you're hearing rather than on what you know. No matter how much knowledge we attain, that is always the goal. So try that out and let me know in the comments what you think. We're going to pick it up from here in the next video, so if you don't want to miss that one, you know what to do.